On October 17, 1997, 14-year-old Emily Winters left her home in the quiet suburban town of Pinewood, Massachusetts to walk her neighbor's golden retriever, Max. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where fallen leaves crunch beneath your feet and the air carries the faint scent of wood smoke from nearby chimneys. Emily's mother, Catherine, had watched from the kitchen window as her daughter disappeared around the corner, blonde ponytail bouncing with each step, the eager dog pulling slightly ahead on his leash. Neither of them could have known that this mundane Friday routine would become the beginning of a mystery that would haunt their community for decades. "Be back before dark," Catherine had called out. Emily had turned, rolled her eyes good-naturedly, and waved. "I know, Mom. Just going the usual route." When Emily hadn't returned after an hour, Catherine felt the first flutter of unease in her stomach. After 90 minutes, she called her husband, Robert, at his dental practice. By dusk, the Winters and several neighbors were combing the walking paths that wound through the wooded areas separating the residential streets of Pinewood Estates. It was Robert who found her, just after 7 p.m., guided by Max's distressed barking. The dog had remained beside Emily, his leash tangled in the underbrush at the edge of Hartman's Field, less than half a mile from the Winters' home. What Robert discovered there would forever divide his life into before and after: Emily lying motionless on her back, eyes staring sightlessly at the darkening sky, her throat slashed with such violence that investigators would later determine it could only have been done with a hunting knife or similar blade. Detective Sergeant Michael Reeves was having dinner with his wife when his phone rang. 30 minutes later, he stood at the perimeter of the hastily established crime scene, watching the tech set up portable lights that cast harsh shadows across the field. At 45, Reeves had investigated his share of homicides in his 20 years with the department, but something about this one immediately felt different. Maybe it was the shocking brutality of the attack in contrast to the peaceful setting, or perhaps it was the victim's age that made his stomach knot as he ducked under the yellow tape. "What do we know?" he asked Lieutenant Diane Crawford, his partner of 3 years. Crawford consulted her notepad. Emily Winters, 14 years old. Left home around 4:15 to walk a neighbor's dog. Father found her at approximately 7:05 p.m. ME's preliminary assessment is death by exsanguination from the neck wound. No obvious signs of sexual assault, but they'll know more after the autopsy. Reeves surveyed the scene. The body lay approximately 15 feet from the tree line, in an area where the field's tall grass had been partially trampled. "Any witnesses?" "We're canvassing now." One resident 2 streets over mentioned seeing a blue pickup truck parked along Orchard Road around 4:30. Said it seemed out of place. "We're following up." "The dog stayed with her the whole time?" Crawford nodded. "Animal control has him now. Poor thing was traumatized but unharmed." "This feels targeted," Reeves said quietly. "The location is secluded enough that someone would have had to know her routine." "Or they were watching and waiting for any opportunity," Crawford suggested. "Either way, it's deeply concerning. This isn't the kind of neighborhood where people lock their doors." "It will be now," Reeves replied grimly. The next 48 hours brought a flurry of activity to the usually peaceful town. The Pinewood Police Department, understaffed for a case of this magnitude, requested assistance from the state police. Yellow crime scene tape cordoned off Hartman's Field. Forensic teams meticulously combed the area for evidence, while detectives conducted door-to-door interviews throughout the surrounding neighborhoods. By Sunday evening, Reeves sat in a conference room that had been converted into an incident command center, staring at the case board. Emily's school photo, showing a smiling girl with bright blue eyes and a smattering of freckles across her nose, was pinned at the center. Around it, they had arranged the scant evidence and witness statements collected so far. "The ME's report came in," Crawford said, dropping a file on the table. "Cause of death confirmed as exsanguination from the single neck wound. Time of death estimated between 4:30 and 5 p.m. No defensive wounds, suggesting she was taken by surprise. No evidence of sexual assault or other trauma." Reeves flipped through the report, his expression darkening. So she's walking the dog, someone approaches, possibly someone she knows or doesn't perceive as a threat, and attacks without warning. That's how it looks, Crawford agreed. We've got more on the blue pickup. 3 separate witnesses now, all placing it in the area between 4 and 5 p.m. One gave a partial plate, Massachusetts registration, starts with WK. Any hits? DMV is running it now. Should have a list of possibles by morning. Reeves pinched the bridge of his nose. What about the guy Mrs. Feldman mentioned? The one she saw at the convenience store earlier that day? Crawford consulted her notes. Described as male, late 30s to early 40s, around 6 feet tall, wearing a dark green jacket and baseball cap. Said he was watching the kids at the store, in a way that gave her the creeps. Store's security camera was broken, naturally. And nobody else saw this guy. Not that we found so far. The ringing of Crawford's cell phone interrupted them. She answered, listened intently, then hung up. We've got another witness. Martin Howell, lives at the corner of Maple and Birch. Says he was out raking leaves Friday afternoon and saw Emily walking the dog around 4:20. About 10 minutes later, he noticed a man walking briskly in the same direction. Description: medium build, dark clothing, couldn't see his face. But here's the interesting part, Howell says the man seemed familiar with the area. Took a shortcut between houses that mainly only locals know about. Reeves stood and added this information to the board. So either a resident or someone who spent enough time here to know the layout. Looks that way, Crawford agreed. I've got officers compiling a list of all adult males in a 3-mile radius, focusing on anyone with a criminal record. Good. And let's get the K-9 unit back out there tomorrow. Maybe they missed something in the initial search. As Reeves drove home that night, the case followed him like a shadow. The facts, sparse as they were, tumbled through his mind. A young girl, walking a familiar route in broad daylight. A brutal attack that seemed both opportunistic and premeditated. A killer who left almost no evidence behind. The neighborhood had transformed overnight. Porch lights blazed in every home, when many would normally be dark. He noticed several fathers standing in their driveways, arms crossed, watching the street with wary eyes. Parents who had previously allowed their children to roam freely were now keeping them indoors. Fear had descended like fog, seeping into every corner of the community. At home, Reeves found his wife, Ellen, waiting up for him. The television was on, tuned to the local news which was running yet another segment on the murder. Any progress? She asked, muting the TV. Reeves shook his head. Not enough. He sank onto the couch beside her. Emily Winters walked that same route with that same dog 3 times a week for months. Was she targeted specifically, or was she just in the wrong place when a predator happened to be hunting? Ellen placed her hand over his. You'll figure it out. You always do. But Reeves wasn't so sure. Something about this case felt different, like trying to assemble a puzzle with crucial pieces missing. The blue pickup truck lead proved frustrating. The DMV search returned 47 vehicles matching the partial plate description within a 30-mile radius. Officers worked through the list methodically, but by the end of the week, they'd eliminated most without finding any clear connection to the case. The witness statements presented conflicting information. Some residents reported seeing Emily alone, others claimed to have seen her talking to someone, while some didn't notice her at all. The timeline became increasingly muddled with each new interview. People's memories are being influenced by what they're hearing on the news, Crawford observed during their morning briefing 1 week after the murder. We're getting contaminated testimony. Reeves nodded grimly. What about the search of the field? Any new evidence? Not much. They found a cigarette but about 30 yards from the scene, relatively fresh. It's been sent for DNA testing, but who knows if it's related. And the knife? Still nothing. Whoever did this either took it with them or disposed of it somewhere we haven't found yet. The investigation continued at a grueling pace. Reeves and Crawford worked 14-hour days, following every potential lead, interviewing and re-interviewing witnesses, examining and re-examining evidence. They established a timeline on the conference room wall, marking every confirmed sighting of Emily, the blue truck, and the unidentified man. 2 weeks into the investigation, they caught what seemed like their first real break. A teacher at Emily's school came forward with information that Emily had mentioned feeling uncomfortable about someone watching her in the weeks before her death. She didn't say much, explained Ms. Harmon, Emily's English teacher. Just that she sometimes felt like someone was following her when she walked the dog. I told her to tell her parents if she was concerned. Did she describe this person at all? Reeves asked. Ms. Harmon shook her head. She never said she actually saw anyone. It was more of a feeling she had. I didn't think much of it at the time. Teenagers often go through phases of feeling self-conscious or paranoid. Now I can't stop wondering if I should have taken it more seriously. This new information sent investigators in a new direction. Had Emily been stalked? Was her murder the culmination of a calculated obsession rather than a random act of violence? They revisited the Winters home, this time paying special attention to Emily's room, her school materials, and her daily routines. Catherine Winters provided Emily's diary, a purple notebook filled with typical teenage concerns about school, friends, and the occasional crush. There were a few vague mentions of feeling watched, and one entry from 3 weeks before her death that read, "Saw that blue truck again today." Probably nothing, but it gives me the creeps. Did Emily ever mention this blue truck to you? Reeves asked Catherine. Her face paled. No, never. If she had, I would have. I would have. She couldn't finish the sentence, collapsing into tears instead. The diary entry reinvigorated the investigation into the blue pickup. They narrowed their focus to vehicles that might have had reason to be in the area regularly. One name on the list stood out, Walter Kramer, 42, owner of a blue 1994 Ford F-150 with a plate beginning with WK. Kramer had a minor criminal record, a DUI 7 years earlier and a disorderly conduct charge from a bar fight, but nothing violent, nothing that would flag him as a potential murderer. More significantly, Kramer worked for a landscaping company that maintained several properties in the Pinewood Estates area, including the community park just 2 blocks from the Winters home. Crawford and Reeves interviewed Kramer at the local police station. He was nervous but cooperative, admitting that he had been in the area on the day of the murder. I was finishing up a job at the Hendersons' place on Sycamore Drive, he explained. Left around 4:30, might have driven past Hartman's field on my way out. But I didn't see anything unusual, and I sure as hell didn't kill anybody. Did you ever notice Emily Winters when you were working in the area? Crawford asked. Blonde girl, 14, often walking a golden retriever. Kramer shifted uncomfortably. I've seen kids walking dogs. Can't say I paid much attention to who was who. Your truck has been spotted in the area multiple times over the past few months, including on days when you weren't scheduled to work at any of your company's client properties, Reeves noted, watching Kramer's reaction carefully. I got friends in the neighborhood, Kramer replied defensively. That's not a crime. Would you be willing to provide a DNA sample? Crawford asked. To eliminate you as a suspect? Kramer hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, fine. Whatever clears this up. I didn't do anything. The DNA sample was sent to the lab, along with the cigarette but found near the scene and blood evidence from Emily's clothing. While they waited for results, Reeves and Crawford dug deeper into Kramer's background and movements. They discovered that one of Kramer's friends in the neighborhood was Sandra Lowry, a divorced mother of 2 who lived just 3 houses down from the Winters family. According to neighbors, Kramer's truck had been seen parked outside Lowry's house at least twice a week for the past few months. When interviewed, Lowry confirmed their relationship but insisted Kramer had been with her from 5 p.m. onwards on the day of the murder. He came over after work, we had dinner, watched a movie. He didn't leave until around midnight. Can anyone else corroborate this? Reeves asked. My kids were at their father's that weekend, Lowry replied. But I'm telling you, Walter was here. He couldn't have done what you're suggesting. The alibi was weak. A gap existed between when Kramer claimed to have left work, 4:30, and when Lowry said he arrived, 5 o'clock. Enough time, potentially, for Kramer to have encountered Emily at Hartman's Field. But just as the investigation seemed to be focusing on Kramer, another lead emerged. A middle school teacher from a neighboring town came forward after seeing Emily's picture on the news. He reported that a similar-looking man in a dark green jacket had been seen watching students at their school events in recent weeks. When shown a photo lineup, the teacher identified not Walter Kramer, but Raymond Dexter, a 45-year-old with no apparent connection to Pinewood Estates. Dexter, when located and questioned, had a solid alibi for the time of Emily's murder. He had been at a medical appointment, confirmed by both doctor and office staff. The green jacket lead seemed to be another dead end. 3 weeks into the investigation, the DNA results came back. The cigarette butt found near the scene contained DNA that didn't match Walter Kramer, Raymond Dexter, or any other potential suspect they had identified. It also didn't match any profiles in the criminal database. Back to square one, Crawford sighed, updating the case board with the latest dead end. Reeves stood silently, studying Emily's photograph. Not necessarily, he said finally. We've been approaching this as if the killer is someone who stands out, someone with an obvious motive or connection. But what if it's someone hiding in plain sight? Someone no one would question being in the area? The investigation shifted again, this time focusing on residents of Pinewood Estates itself. They compiled a list of all adult males living within a mile radius of Hartman's Field, cross-referencing it with those who might have known Emily's routine. One name caught their attention, Frank Dawson, 39, a real estate agent who lived alone in a house backing up to the wooded area near where Emily was found. Initial background checks showed no criminal history, but something about Dawson's interview had struck Crawford as odd. He seemed almost too helpful, she recalled. Offered all this information about his whereabouts without being asked, mentioned having security cameras on his property but then said they weren't working that day. They decided to take a closer look at Dawson. Surveillance was established on his home, and officers discreetly interviewed his neighbors and colleagues. What emerged was a picture of a man who kept to himself but was well regarded professionally. No one had anything negative to say about him, but few seemed to know him well. One detail stood out: Dawson was known to be an avid hunter and owned several knives and hunting implements. On a hunch, Reeves obtained a warrant to examine Dawson's financial records and online activity. His credit card statements showed a purchase at an outdoor supply store 3 days before Emily's murder. The store confirmed he had bought a new hunting knife, though Dawson claimed he had lost it while hiking the weekend before the murder. His internet history revealed searches for information about local police investigative procedures and news articles about similar crimes in other states. Concerning, but not damning. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. The Winters family held a memorial service for Emily 1 month after her death. Among the hundreds of attendees, a plainclothes officer noticed Frank Dawson, standing at the back of the church, watching the proceedings with an intensity that seemed inappropriate. When Dawson left early, the officer followed discreetly. Instead of heading home, Dawson drove to Hartman's Field, now reopened to the public but still bearing the invisible stain of tragedy. He walked to the approximate location where Emily's body had been found and stood there for several minutes, head bowed. The officer photographed this behavior and reported back. A new search warrant was obtained, this time for Dawson's entire property. In his garage, tucked inside a tackle box beneath fishing gear, investigators found a plastic bag containing a woman's bracelet, a delicate silver chain with a heart-shaped charm. Catherine Winters identified it as Emily's, a 13th birthday gift that had been missing since her death. When confronted with this evidence, Dawson's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. He maintained his innocence but couldn't explain how Emily's bracelet ended up in his possession. A more thorough search of his home revealed a hidden compartment in his basement containing newspaper clippings about Emily's murder and several photographs taken of her walking Max on different occasions. DNA testing eventually confirmed what the circumstantial evidence suggested: the blood found under Emily's fingernails, previously thought to be too degraded for testing, contained genetic material that matched Frank Dawson's DNA. The case seemed solved, but crucial questions remained unanswered. Dawson refused to confess or explain his actions. The murder weapon was never found, despite extensive searches of his property and the surrounding woods. And most disturbing of all, investigators couldn't determine a clear motive. Dawson had no prior connection to Emily or her family. If he had been stalking her, as the evidence suggested, what had triggered his obsession? As the case moved toward prosecution, these unanswered questions haunted Detective Reeves. On paper, they had their killer, the evidence was compelling, if not absolutely conclusive. But in his gut, Reeves couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something fundamental about the case. Nearly a year after Emily's death, as Dawson awaited trial, an unexpected development occurred. Sandra Lowry, Walter Kramer's alibi witness and the Winters' neighbor, committed suicide. She left a note that mentioned feeling guilt over the lies I told, but didn't specify what those lies were. Had she falsely provided Kramer with an alibi? Had she known something about Emily's murder that she kept hidden? These questions would never be answered. Today, more than 20 years later, Frank Dawson remains in prison, convicted of Emily Winters' murder based largely on circumstantial evidence and the DNA match. He continues to maintain his innocence. Walter Kramer left Pinewood shortly after the trial and hasn't been seen in the area since. Detective Michael Reeves, now retired, still drives by Hartman's Field occasionally. Sometimes he pulls over and stands at the edge, looking out over the tall grass swaying in the breeze, wondering about the pieces of the puzzle that never quite fit together. The residents of Pinewood Estates have changed over the years. New families have moved in, children who never knew Emily ride their bikes along the same paths she once walked. But something intangible changed in the community after her death, an innocence lost, a shadow that never fully receded. And somewhere, perhaps, the truth about what really happened on that autumn afternoon in 1997 still waits to be discovered.